Hello, I'm not legendary game designer Lorne Lanning, so I don't know why you're wasting your time here. But hey, while I've got you, I recently passed 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.com, and after 3 months and one official complaint to YouTube management, my plaque finally arrived to confirm it. Anyway, it seems to be customary for YouTubers to do some sort of Q&A video when they hit a certain amount of subscribers. And I love answering questions. I love discussing stuff. So I really felt like I should do one of those. I put out a thing months ago asking people to provide questions that they thought would be good for this sort of thing. And I also held back a couple of questions that I got on Curious Cat I thought would be worth answering on video. So we're gonna do that now. How old are you? Okay, I actually made like little bits of notes next to some of the questions that I thought, oh, I might forget this when I'm actually recording it. And for some reason in brackets I put, it's 25 here. I'm not really sure why I did that. I must have very low expectations of myself. Anyway, yeah, I'm 25. I've kind of looked like I was 14 for most of my life. My hairline has always been this far receded, so you can't make fun of it because I'm comfortable with this. I fully expect to go bald within the next 3 to 6 months. I can't wait, to be honest. You know, I've never really cared about my appearance, as you can tell from just the way I dress and look. You can't let yourself care about your appearance when you look like me. It would destroy me. So I've always kind of just messed with my hair. I've always kind of grown it out super long for no reason and then shaved it all off just to see what would happen. Usually it's looked rubbish, but I've never really cared. One time I dyed my hair like really yellowy blonde for a video that I ended up deciding wasn't worth making, and the time for it has passed. It was a music video starring me as Milo Yiannopoulos. It's probably the most extravagant thing I'd ever done, and I dyed my hair for it, and it would, you know, it had to grow out, so it was like 8 months of awful hair. For a piece that I decided to not make. So if you're wondering why my hair was awful for a long stretch of last year and this year, that was why. I actually made it with 2 other friends. One of them was the musician who composed a bunch of it, and the other one sort of helped out on set when we were shooting it. And that guy also had a camcorder and was filming the whole process, including me dyeing my hair. So there's a good 2-hour rubbish documentary about the hijinks that we got up to attempting to make this thing that I ended up never finishing. It looks like it's working. I can feel something happening, but I can also see my skin getting kind of reddish. Maybe I should edit that together for patrons. That would be a fun thing to do. Let me know. Anyway, I'm done hijacking that question to ramble about my hair now, so let's move on. What's your favourite piece of fan fiction of any kind ever? You specified of any kind, which means I get to take wild leaps, so nice one there. My personal favourite fan fiction ever is a film that came out in 2014 called The Guest. The Guest is really good, by the way. You should watch it. It's really good. Dan Stevens, amazing in it. British people represent. That film is very clearly Chris Evans era Captain America fanfiction. It is very deliberately a guy on the run from a S.H.I.E.L.D. style organization trying to be a good person, live his own life in a world that that no longer suits him. The serial numbers have been filed off, but there is a very clear S.H.I.E.L.D. type organization. I mean, it might not actually be at all. That might not have been anyone's plan whatsoever, and I've just read into the film. It wouldn't be the first time, but for me, it's just a really good film, and it has enough little things in there that it qualifies as this kind of rumination on the kind of super soldier that Captain America is in the more recent films, and I think that's kind of interesting. It's also just a really good film. I am now, however, going to give my favourite fanfiction that's an actual fanfiction, so that, you know, I actually answered the question properly. As for my favourite piece of actual fanfiction, you have to go with My Immortal. It's really funny. It's definitely a parody of other fanfictions and the fights that happen when people collaborate on them. It's definitely a parody. If you don't agree that's a lie, it's not true, I'll see you in hell. It's good and it's funny. This next one's a long one. Great. Could you recommend some good social sciences literature for beginners, or other literature that has influenced you the most? I'd love to be as articulate and good at critical thinking as you. That won't be too hard. Many of my acquaintances are right-leaning and pretty racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. Still, I feel like I could easily give them a bit of perspective if I only had enough knowledge and good argumentative skills. People have asked me for reading lists quite often. This is kind of a question that I held back because it's emblematic of a lot of questions I get. If I were to come up with like a list, it would just be a lot of books from a variety of different categories, because quite often something really simple that isn't really about any particular issue informs your perspective a lot, even though it's not even covering it. So rather than like just give you a list of all the books I happen to have read, or pretend that I'm educated enough to know how to construct a reading list for someone else, I'm just going to give some general broad strokes sort of recommendations for how to educate yourself, and then give some actual recommendations. So I think I would first recommend looking at the basic ideas that underlie any particular social science. So like psychology, sociology, the other humanities, you know, the rest, whatever you want to call them. They exist for a reason, to study a specific thing, and they usually have some kind of specific goal in mind. So like psychology is the study of human behavior, but also has the kind of goal of making people more healthy. I once read this little tiny book from years and years and years ago, it's really old, called Psychoanalysis for Normal People. And it opened with a statement that said words to the effect of, the purpose of psychoanalysis is to make you ready for anything, something like that. That to me was this sort of, aha, you know, this is why we do this. It's not just, we're checking to see what would happen if you lock people up in a fake prison. It's, we're trying to learn how we behave in different contexts so that we can better understand contexts we can create that enhance human behavior. You know, can we educate ourselves out of certain behaviors that we exhibit? I would basically recommend you go to the source, look up the reasoning behind why a field of study exists. Like, why do people do psychiatry, or psychology, or sociology, or any of the other humanities? Why? What is its purpose? What is it looking at? And what are its methodologies? And why is it beneficial to use them? I think a lot of people lack the sort of base level understanding of what it does and why that makes the whole thing make sense. So I don't think I'm not sure if I have it anywhere, but when I was in my third year of university, I was doing an English and film degree, so I had lots of free time. I actually just started buying science and sociology books off of people who were doing either like a master's or were finishing and were selling their books. So I could just, out of interest, read what they were like, and that was kind of I guess a flashpoint for my own understanding of these concepts, was bothering to just pick up a basic book on it and read it. In fact, I'm going to look for it now. I'm going to carry my portable recorder with me. I keep a bunch of books back here, and I'm pretty sure my old applied psychology book is here somewhere. I literally just, like, there was a girl who was just finishing a master's and she was leaving, and she was selling all of the books that she bought because they're expensive, so people want to buy them used. And the set is too big, it's in the way of my library. So they just started selling all the books, and here we are, I found it. It's next to my Call of Cthulhu 3rd edition book. Well, I don't know what edition it is actually. And also my collected works of George Orwell. This is what I don't have much of a system for this library. So this was the book that I bought just for the fun of it. One of these. I have a couple others that I got off different people, and they're just books where they're basically just a primer on what the issue is. The most interesting part of the book for me, as someone who wasn't as interested in the social sciences at the time, was the preface, the introduction, and the, yeah, like this was it. This was the eye-opening moment. 1.1 of the introduction. What is applied psychology? Like, it opens by explaining what it is and what it's for, and why you would care. And that's the most important part of these books, in my opinion, is explaining why it's valuable, why you would use it, and the purpose of approaching things from that perspective in the first place, because that's the part that in modern discourse people ignore the most. They go immediately to the idea of this imagined intent that any psychologist or economist who disagrees with them, or any kind of feminist-leaning person in the humanities, clearly has this agenda, when the agenda, if anything, is spelled out already and you can read it. And they've clearly ignored that to go, no, they want to collectivize everything, or whatever it is that they say nowadays. This isn't, you know, the one book you have to read, but I would basically recommend picking up basic primers in any of these fields and just reading through them. This was a fantastic read. I basically just skipped through it the first time, and just whoever had bought this before me had done their own markings, so I just read those bits and checked it out. It's really informative. Another book I would recommend, while we're doing like basic primers that you would do in a university level, is Literary Theory and Anthology. This is the first book I got when I was in university, and I'm just going to go over to my little bookshelf that I actually just got in so I can have more stuff. So I have more stuff on this set. What are some good ones? I'm not a very good educator. I can't be like, oh, here's all the stuff that you need to read first before Gender Trouble makes sense. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I didn't understand it until I read it, and then I did. So if there's some magic other step that a smarter person would tell you to read first, I'm sorry, I don't know what it is. Conquest of Bread is good. It's good. I'm just going to unequivocally recommend that you read it. It's good. Just have fun. Pedagogy of the Oppressed is really good as well. Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex is really good, and it's big, but it's worth reading, and it's lots of little chapters, and each of them has something interesting to say, and it's cool. My favourite book of the list of things I've got right now is Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Sadism, and it's really good because, well, not this good actually. Do not buy this version. This side of every page is grayer and harder to read. Don't buy this version. But I had another version, and again, like, I just lost a bunch of my old books, but this is really, really good. And I think it's that, and perhaps some like Zizek books I wouldn't actually recommend any of his books though, are the most informative to my perspective on how I approach a lot of issues, how I think about them, and they're really good at getting you to question how you approach an issue in the first place, which is the thing I want to stress. You need to go like, why am we doing this? So like, if you want to talk about these issues to someone who doesn't understand them, then the thing that they're probably missing, first and foremost, is an understanding of why it's important to approach things from that perspective, or from any perspective in the first place. A lot of people, the way they're currently thinking naturally occurs to them, and they wouldn't even think to use another approach. So I think the purpose of a lot of this work is to sort of plunge you into another perspective and make you think from it. A lot of writing on politics is written to be seamless, to be like, oh, this goes down easy, and this all makes sense, and it complements the way I already looked at the world. Like all of, I was about to say all of Michael Moore's books, but I only ever read one of them. Stupid White Men, I think it's called, is rubbish because it's so convenient. Like it goes down so easy that you don't actually learn anything from it. You just go, ah, yes, these people are bad. Whereas I think a lot of the books that I've just recommended are like, oh, this is a way of looking at things that I didn't have before, and that's like more valuable almost. In a way, I have a better understanding of and appreciation for left-leaning ideas because I've read so much right-wing bullshit in my life. Every major villain in human history has written a manifesto about why they're doing it. Read that. I wish I had a copy of Mein Kampf to hold up and go, also read this because it's informative, and I think it's important to get the most accurate understanding of the perspective that informs it, but I don't actually have a physical copy with me right now because the one that I recently bought had to be returned because the text went all the way into the spine. It was incredibly poorly published. Mein Kampf became public domain last year, and it now exists in hundreds, if not thousands, of versions and printings that are rubbish. Also, by the way, if you're in high school, do not ask your high school library to get you a copy of Mein Kampf. You will go on a list. I don't know what's scarier in Mein Kampf. The fact that you can feel yourself being propagandized, you can feel yourself being almost convinced of the thing that he's saying, or the part where, you know, it's just outright racist ideology, or the bit where there's a bunch of advice in there for how to act in modern politics that still works. that's still 100% good advice for how to be good in politics. Like, that's scary in its own way. Like, I'd recommend reading it if you can stomach that sort of thing. It was kind of a bit rambly, and there was a lot of books in there, and they might not even be the best books to start with, but I hope that helps. Thanks. I noticed that you rarely discuss gender, sexuality, diversity, or other SJW issues in your non-measured response videos, e.g. Fallout, Soulsborne, Braid. The closest thing was talking about Irene in your Sherlock video. Is this an intentional choice? If so, why? If not, do you think there's a reason why you keep that shit packed up, or is this all in my imagination? I don't keep them divided on purpose. I do think that I try and make everything with the same kind of perspective in mind. I don't like the idea of there being a break in the kinds of content I make. At the same time, I do think I talk quite a lot about the ideas and what they might mean for us as players in games quite often. Like, Dark Souls 2, I think, has something really interesting to say about its world, but more importantly about our world and how to live in it. How do you live in a world where you might not actually basically have ever existed, because you'll die and be so completely forgotten that it doesn't even matter. Like, how do you act in a world where that can happen? I think it asks really interesting questions. I don't like turning that kind of work into a manifesto where I go, oh no, this is what this means and this is how we have to live our lives based on Dark Souls 2 telling us, you know. I could do that, but I have this, I guess the term is, I guess I want to avoid being preachy, and I think people are very quick to dismiss people as preachy if they just don't like what they have to say, but I also want to avoid being it. Some of the stuff that I'm working on right now, especially the Deus Ex Human Revolution video, which is the current long project I'm working on, I always have a long project, does deal quite a lot with social topics and the points, and I guess it'll be my most SJW game analysis. Just because it comes up more because it's a game that prizes itself so much more on story than Fallout 3 or the Souls games do. In fact, they pride themselves on not having as much. Are you single? No, sorry. Do you think that it's possible to be friends with people who exhibit alt-right traits? Is it possible to overlook such negative qualities? That is a cracking question. It's possible. I know people who are like, oh, I don't believe any of this, but I can be friends with them, that's fine. But they're usually people who don't have anything to lose from the views of those people. You know, if you want to, let's, you know, take the most shitty definition of alt-right, you know, like they want to build a white ethno-state. Usually it's easy to be friends with those people if you're white. For me personally, it's not possible to be friends with people who exhibit really far-right beliefs. Either I immediately start arguing with them and, you know, there is no friendship, or I sort of consciously remember some of the shitty things they say and just think less about wanting to hang out with them again. I have a friend who sort of shifted further right in the last couple of years, and I just stopped talking to him. Like, not on purpose, I didn't deliberately blank him or anything, I'm not that sort of person, but I just thought less and less about that person in my life. And that's just kind of how people are, I think. I think there are probably people who have thought less about hanging out with me because of my far left beliefs, you know. That's just kind of how things work, isn't it? Did you build your computer yourself or pay to have one custom built? The first computer I ever had was custom built by this guy called Jed, who I really looked up to and thought was cool. So I was like, after this, I'm going to build my own. And then I bought an iMac and I used that for years. But then I realized that I liked PC games more than I liked having a slightly nicer version of Photoshop. And eventually I built a PC that could actually play games, and it was great. And I've built my own PCs ever since. What's your advice on long distance relationships? Oh, fuck. You know, like in a lot of relationships where you see the person every day, you can get into this routine where it just becomes normal to hang around with that person, and that's nice. But I think if you're in a relationship where you don't see each other as much, it's important to make the times you are together really special and feel really important. You basically have to have a better relationship in a shorter amount of time. So make sure that you do that in whatever way you see fit, and because I don't know what that way is. What color is your toothbrush? It's blue and white. How did you support yourself financially before you were drafted into the culture war? Okay, for about 6 months before I started making videos, I was an IT engineer, and then I realized that they were underpaying me because they could get away with it. So I quit and I started doing animations for the School of Life on their YouTube channel, which was fun. And then I realized that video I'd made like a year ago by that point had done really well, and I could probably have made more because the audience actually existed, despite me assuming it didn't for quite a while. So then I just started making stuff in my spare time while I was finding more work, and then I stopped having to find more work, and it was really cool. So that was that. Prior to that, I'd just got out of university, and you know, I worked in like a chip shop while I was at uni for a couple of weeks, and then you know, I quit, and then the place got closed because of rats. Have you ever played the LucasArts adventures? Not really. I've heard they're really good, and I have no reason to disagree because what I have played of them is good, but I've never finished one or played it for that long, apart from the first Monkey Island. I'm really more into the kind of weird adventure games where you can die easily, and they were made with like a very like precise sense of humor, or they were just like shoddily put together. Like there's something fun about playing bad point-and-click adventure games. So those are the ones that I've sought after as a child. I was absolutely in love with Shadow of the Comet and Prisoner of Ice growing up. They're just fantastically, just like not that great games, but they're just fun enough that you do want to keep playing and you want to know how the story ends, and you also want to experience the horror of the game breaking or not working properly, or something that you never thought you had to do hours before killing you. Like they're that kind of school of game. There's a fantastic part in, I think it's Prisoner of Ice, where you're supposed to be looking around for an exit and you're just off the screen, and there's nothing on the screen that you can find to be going wherever you're supposed to be going. There's nothing there. You walk the character off screen, and the character comes back and says, "There's more stuff here," and then the camera turns and there's more stuff. Like, the game hits a point where it's just fucking with you, just to see how much it can make you play. And by the end, you get a choice of two endings in Prisoner of Ice, and they're both basically the same, and they both end with the same cutscene after this little bit in the middle. And it's like, they were just testing to see if I would bother getting to the end, and I lost by doing it. Like, I failed the test. So those are the kind of games I got really into, instead of the LucasArts ones, which always seemed kind of well made and polished, and that just wasn't my style. I actually think I own one of the few physical copies of Limbo of the Lost, which is a point-and-click adventure game I'm going to do a video about at some point. I want to do a video series about obscure games not many people know about. Limbo of the Lost is one of them. It's a point-and-click adventure game with assets just stolen from Oblivion and Morrowind and Enclave and a bunch of other games, and they just sold it. Like, people paid money to buy this game, and it's like basically theft. I'd love to do a thing just looking at it, because it's also, alongside that, like before I found out all of that and also then checked and found more myself, that it's just such a bad game in so many ways that it might be a game I played the most in my life, just to inspect it. You know, sometimes you play games to sort of understand why they were made, and a lot of like bad point-and-click adventure games do that better than any other game genre. So it also means I missed out on a lot of the good ones. So at some point I want to go back and play more of those, but instead I'm more of the like kind of weird French ones, the illegal ones, and also really like some of the King's quests are really good. Police Quest, Space Quest. God, there's a lot of quests I just realized now, finally, after all these years. Gabriel Knight as well. All three of the Gabriel Knight games are like these obscene... The first one's all right, like it's nice art. The puzzles mostly make sense. And then Gabriel Knight 2 and 3 are just these like bizarro nightmares that don't make any sense. I mean, everyone kind of at this point knows the cat hair mustache puzzle from the third game. Imagine like me as a child trying to, like, having to look that up and going, what? Why would you do this? And it turned out that that was put in by producers or something, like they requested some particularly hard puzzle for some reason. I think it might be to sell strategy guides or something. Like, hey, I recently rewatched your Undertale vid. Any chance we could see a video about your disagreements with the ideological implications of the game theorists, even if it's just a short Patreon-only vid, for instance? This question was asked in June, before the Lisa video came out, where I kind of do cover some of this. But no. I also kind of liked leaving it at that kind of vague comment and then moving on. There's something funny about not fully explaining it. But basically, I think they reflect a perspective that is sort of unhealthy to have about games, where you kind of inspect them for canon. I think it's almost a crime to think wrong about games. So game theorists are bad. You know, for me, the fun of Sans was that he's this kind of silly weirdo who's clearly hiding something. and finding out what that is and getting this explanation during a fight if you choose to play the game a certain way is really fun. And I kind of think it almost takes away from that for someone to go, ah yes, but I've gone over it with a fine-tooth comb and trying to piece together the comprehensive story. Like, whatever story you turn up isn't as interesting as the story you experience just playing it normally. So that's, What's your guide to consuming inhuman quantities of media? You seem to have seen/read like fucking everything, while I take weeks to watch like a single fucking season of a series. I also do that. I'm still partway through Recreators, which is an anime I really like, and I just stopped and haven't seen it again for a while, and I don't know why I do that. I do that with tons of shows that I really like. I love Kino's Journey, and I still haven't seen, I think, either of the Kino's Journey movies that exist, and like, why have I not done that? That's stupid. I have the same problem, but the trick is to watch things and remember the contents of them as much as possible so that you then can just call them back anytime. Like, I'm 25, I've had 25 years of consuming media. I've seen, you know, all of the episodes of The Simpsons that were out when I was 14. I'd seen all of them because they were what I watched as a kid. So like, I have like access to every event from, you know, every quote from The Simpsons from those seasons is just there in my head somewhere. Just try and remember the things that you watch and you'll eventually have this huge backlog to refer to. I don't watch that much stuff. I still don't even watch the things that I like. I make videos about games quite a lot now for a living, basically, and I don't actually play that many games anymore because making videos is so time consuming. Have you thought of doing a general election video? It would be cool to see your political positions, however I can see how this might be divisive. This question was made on the 1st of June, and my answer to that question was, oh, that's a good idea, and then I made a video about it. So thank you, whoever asked that question, for giving me the idea to make a video that ended up doing quite well. So I also want to do more political type stuff in the future along those lines. So thank you for asking this question and changing the future of my YouTube channel forever, whoever that was. So I guess my answer to that question is thanks. Does that count as an answer? Do you feel that people are naturally good and made bad by their environment, naturally bad and made good by their environment, good is spelled with an I, or blank slates entirely shaped by their environment? I think that people don't have a nature. I think that humans, if they have one key thing that keeps happening, is they change a lot. Everything is always different with humans. If you look at things from any measurement of distance or time, we behave radically differently given just a couple of years or generations. And like, the English language itself has altered radically in the last few hundred years, and then it kept changing. So like, there are just like periods of history where if you move this person here, you couldn't even understand them. And from that perspective, of course, our behavior is going to change a lot because the society that we're in has a huge impact on it. But because humans build society, obviously it's not something we're completely unable to control. To a certain extent, no one's really in control of anything and no one's to blame for any crimes. Basically, the answer is it's too complicated for anyone to understand, and we're in big trouble. What do you think about Homestuck, if you've read it? I've never read Homestuck, and I might never get around to it, but I probably should at some point. It looks okay, and everyone who talks about it is very opinionated about it in some direction or the other, and wow. There's a picture going around of me and a friend being yowied. A woman drew us in an embrace, and someone else drew a version of that where we were Homestuck characters. That's the most interaction I've had ever with Homestuck, and I plan on reading it, but eventually. I have no solid plans. I might eventually read it, and I'm sure I'll love it. That was a joke. Any thoughts on the Dishonored series? The Dishonored series, it's really good, it's really good, it's really well made, it's a really good immersive sim. I was absolutely amazed by the level of just control that you have over outcomes of encounters. Like, I was kind of starved for games where you can just go, oh, this person lives from this encounter, and they come back and actually impacts the story, even if it's just a little tiny way. It's good. I really like the Dishonored series. I haven't played the newest thing, Death of the Outsider. I hope it's good. I might actually do a thing on the Dishonored series now I think about it. Like, there's a lot to say actually about the complexity of its design. Probably should have thought to do that earlier. Thanks, question asker, for reminding me of a video I should make. This question comes from Justin Partridge on Patreon. Are you reading any new comics regularly? Like, do you have a pull box somewhere? I don't read that many new comics. I tend to wait until the comic is done and then I can just read the whole thing through. So I'm really looking forward to Black Panther, Black Bolt. Those both sound really, really cool. And I like the bits of them that I've seen. I'd like to read them in full, but I don't tend to read that many new comics. And I also stopped reading webcomics like regularly. I started just going, oh wait, 6 months or 2 years, I mean, in a huge burst. I did that with Gunnerkrigg Court. I read all of it like immediately when I first heard about it, and then I waited like 4 years and then read all of it again. It's great. And now I'm waiting again. Max S on Patreon asks, does asking if you're going to do a Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines video count as an ask? Because I know you said you were going to do a New Vegas one and those are both in your Fallout 3 list. Yes, I am eventually going to do it. I actually have a specific idea for this in mind. The best video essayist on YouTube, bar none, Noah Caldwell Gervais, did a video covering 2 of the games that Troika made. And he says that Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines doesn't hold up like he remembered it, and it's actually quite bad in a lot of ways. And that sounded like blasphemy, but now I'm worried that he's right, because like he's right about a lot of things. So I'm probably going to do a video directed at him where I specifically go, oh yeah, and go through it and see if he's right. I think that'd be a really interesting video to try doing. So who knows? Like, I haven't played it in quite a while, and I remember really liking it and thinking it was really good. Am I gonna have to like retroactively apologize for that list and go like, oh no, one of these was bad? Like, that's a really cool video to make actually. I should make that sooner than I expected to. This one comes from Alex Scranton on Patreon. Who or what inspired you to toss your hat into the fuckery of the YouTube gaming ring? Were you always just interested in the criticism side, or did you start by watching LPs or something else? And what content creator would you say inspired you the most? In terms of video game related content, there isn't much, but I really liked the tone set by the people at Shut Up and Sit Down. They've been doing board game reviews for years, and even their earliest stuff is just like really funny and well put together, and I think that was the most directly inspirational in terms of the idea that you could make this stuff. I don't think I have any specific inspirations in terms of the kinds of content I make myself though. I think it came from more of a place of realizing that people have emotional responses to things that they don't understand. You know, like I didn't enjoy Fallout 3 for a lot of reasons that I couldn't really articulate when someone asked me why. I think a lot of my videos are basically me trying to kind of like explain why I felt the way that I did in the first place. It's kind of like taking steps backwards from the visceral experience of playing the game, if that makes sense. Since you're pretty much the only famous No Man's Sky apologist, you should do a retrospective video on the things they've changed to the game and how they impact the vision of the game as it was released, and really whose fault is it that Hello Games ended up having such a terrible reputation? Spoilers, it's Sony's fault. As someone who really liked specifically what No Man's Sky was when it came out, the fact they've changed it to be a lot more like the game they apparently promised to people, I didn't pay attention to the marketing, worries me a little bit. I'm worried I'm going to go back to it and it's not going to actually be the thing that I enjoyed. But if more people can be happy with the game it is now, then good for them, I suppose. No Man's Sky is a game that released in early access, but they didn't tell anyone that it released in early access, which is a bold new strategy, but also probably illegal. They probably should have just said, it's early access. They could have just done that. I'm not the biggest fan of early access as a business model, but it would have made it a lot more. At the same time, I appreciated the goal of releasing a finished game that was empty and lonely. I loved that. Are you still developing that game? Yes, I am spending ages on it. I'd originally planned for it to be a challenge where I do all of the writing and animation and art and programming and music, and then I slowly kind of realized that I can't do all of that because I'm rubbish at most of it. So I should hire on people who can do all those things and try and at least make it ever exist. So a good portion of the last couple of months has been me figuring out what parts of the game I actually am comfortable with it being me making and what parts I feel like I should outsource to other people. I'm now at the point where I'm explaining the idea and the concepts I want to use in the game to other people. And that's cool because it's kind of letting other people in on the ideas that I've had and finding out which ones are ridiculous and I shouldn't be using and like just don't make sense to everyone else, and which parts actually do make some sense. And also being forced to elevator pitch your game or describe it to someone else who has to like weigh in on it. I honestly think that collaboration between people and having to explain yourselves to more people in a group is more valuable than being one person who spends years slaving away with a perfect vision or whatever. I guess the answer is yes, I'm still developing that game, but eventually it will be more than me, and maybe one day it'll exist, and I hope it's good, because I've spent so long on it. What is your favourite Blind Guardian album? Night at the Opera, no question. I even wrote Night at the Opera, no question on this. It's the best full album. I really like some of the songs on Wheel of Time and Twist in the Myth, but Night at the Opera is the whole package, it's all good. And yes, I did discover Blind Guardian through the Robot Unicorn Attack heavy metal version. I'm basically a cultural void. That's all the questions that I could be bothered to answer. Thank you all very much for watching. You can reach me on Curious Cat and I'll respond if I think it'll be interesting to do and I won't make a fool of myself. I might keep some back for a future video. I kind of wanted to do 150,000 subscriber one as well. And then I passed the 150,000 mark while I was waiting for the plaque to arrive to do this one. So I might eventually just do a 150,000 subscriber special when I hit a different milestone, so I'm always just a little bit staggered behind. That might be a funny joke. I'm also kind of thinking of just doing Q&A stuff more often for backers. I want to do a thing where like people who back me a certain amount ask a question and then I'll do a video answering them and it'll be a nice fun time. I kind of want to do these kinds of videos more often. I kind of am actually, you can probably tell, I'm building a set. And when it's finished, and also when it's warm, because in the winter it's freezing in here, I'm gonna stream from here. And I'd love to do like Q&A streams from here every now and then where I answer questions asked by patrons. So let me know what you think of that. I didn't write an ending for this video. Bye!